Teddy Talks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Teddy Talks After Hours, where we pause, rewind, and unpack each episode. And this one's really for grown-ups out there. So maybe your kids are scooted off to school, maybe they're off to bed. And now we can talk straight to the parents and the educators and all of those adult listeners out there. So I am here with Jim Jacobs, who was our guest on Teddy Talks today. And fun fact, a fellow children's podcaster. So, Jim, this episode was all about foster youth and adoption, which I know is one that is important to you personally. So let's pause. Why is this topic important to you?
Yeah, I'm really glad to be able to talk about this because my family, we've been interacting with the foster and adoptive communities for many, many years, both from just kind of supporting and lots of friends in that world. But then we also entered that world of being foster care licensed several years ago. I went through all that process. And then through the years, we did adopt our youngest son in our family.
So let's think about rewinding this episode a little bit and kind of unpack this. So in this episode, the Teddy twins learned in your Teddy Talk that there are many different ways to make a family. And Grizzle and Grizzlette also had a lot of questions about why kids get adopted. So can we just quickly recap your Teddy Talk about how we can explain this to kids, why kids get fostered and adopted?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good opportunity to start the conversation at home. I think that's where, the best conversations happen when we can give some starting points and kind of hand it over to the grown-ups to continue that conversation. And so when you're thinking about, how do you navigate a conversation like this of different families, or families just look different, and specifically if we're getting into the niche of adoptive and foster care, I love how we talk about how there's a big focus and emphasis on love, because I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding about, there's so many different situations that families are in. And oftentimes, the reasons around the changes of a child moving between families, they're very big, heavy topics. And so trying to break that down for a kid can be hard, but I would focus around finding a home that it's a tough one. Let me think about it first.
And that is exactly why we are here on Teddy Talks, because one of the things we want to do is model for parents and educators when kids ask these tough questions. And even as we were writing this episode, we were like, what is a way to explain that a 5-year-old could understand? So I loved, Jim, that you have focused it in on love, which is, there's a lot of different ways to make a family. And what's important is that that child is in a family where they feel loved and cared for. I think as a parent, we've all had that experience where kids point out differences. Like, let's say you're at the grocery store and we're like, that kid doesn't look like their mommy. And like one of our instincts as parents is to be like, shh, that's not polite, or don't say that. But kids notice differences. Okay. Kids notice differences from the very early months, as babies even, they can notice differences. And so when we shush them in the grocery store, it's often a result of like, we don't know exactly what to say. So we say nothing. And that's why Teddy Talks was born. Have you ever had an experience where, being a foster or adoptive parent where your kids have asked a question and you've been like, or you've had to really try to like explain something to them?
That's almost a daily occurrence. And absolutely, that's normal. And it's funny, being a parent, we're all parents for the first time. We're figuring this out as we go, and we're going to be imperfect, and we're not going to do things the right way. And we're you try the best you can.
For sure.
In our house, when, we have these like big questions, my wife and I, we want to be the source where our kids go to and trust. And we want to be the place where they can ask questions and get a pretty straight answer. And because, these things start young, even a lot younger than I thought of for our kids to be able to comprehend the differences or, just big topics. And so Yeah, I would lean and encourage you to lean into just being truthful and transparent with your kids so that they can know that they can trust you for coming to you for a real answer.
I love that. And I think there's also room. I'm a parent as well. And sometimes, I mean, I have awkward conversations for a living because I'm a school psychologist. And so people ask me all kinds. I've heard a lot of things in my day. And sometimes I don't have the answer. And I think that's okay to model for kids. If they ask something, you're like, gosh, that's just a great question. And we were very strategic at Teddy Talks. We call it a very big question, not a very good question, because we want kids to know that, tapping into our Mr. Rogers energy, that when you're curious, you're learning. And I think it's okay if you just say, that's a really big question. And, let's think about that together. I love this curiosity. I'm curious as well. And you can model that for your kids because, we're going to get questions that we don't have the answers to. Let's rewind this episode a little bit further. So I want you to think back to when you were younger, and it could be like either when you were a kid and you encountered kids in your world that were foster or adopted. Is there anything you wish your younger self knew about fostering or adoption that you could tell your younger self? Or maybe when you first started the foster adopting process, if there's some pearl of wisdom. So let's just rewind and give yourself some advice now that you know what you know.
Holy smokes. I could probably write a book about all the things that I didn't know about this topic as a much younger version of myself. And so to boil it down, if we're talking about like me as a kid and thinking about what I was thinking about in this topic, if I'm being real with you, I probably would have leaned into like, there's something wrong with that kid, and that choices that child made put them in a situation that now they're in a complicated situation. I've now learned how wrong and irresponsible that thinking was as a child. And so that's what I want, as we come around foster families and adoptive families. That is something I'm so interested in wanting our kids and the kids I'm around to know that these situations most of the time have nothing to do with that child's choices or things that are going on. They're, like we said in the episode, they're grown-up issues. They're grown-up things going on. And so just reframing it of, this, sometimes there's, if we're going full on into grown-up mode here, like there's really complicated and messy situations that families fall into that have nothing to do obviously with the kids. And they're the collateral damage that then have a lot of broken pieces and a lot of brokenness that is nothing of their doing. And it's not at all their fault. They just have to now live and carry the brokenness and burden with them. And so it's our job to come alongside them, love them, care for them just for who they are.
I love how you put that, because so many times as kids don't understand when things are different, and they assume different is bad, or they come up with all kinds of reasons for why situations are the way they are or why kids act the way they are. And one of the things we want to do at Teddy Talks is to help kids understand that different isn't always bad, and that if you kind of try to have some empathy, like what would it be like for this kid to, have moved to a different home and be away from what they've always known? What would that feel like? It can really help our kids understand empathy. So I look forward to your book dropping next fall of all the things you wish you had known. We'll look forward to that. Let's unpack it just even a little bit more for parents and teachers and the grown-ups and other Teddy Talk listeners. So at Teddy Talks, as you know, we share big ideas for little ears, but a lot of adults out there listening right now. What is one thing that you want the big ears listeners to know about talking to kids about fostering and adoption? Let's come up with an example of, there's a kid at school who's new and, they're a foster youth. Like, what would you advise parents to talk to their kids about?
One big thing that I've learned about in this topic is that there's little ways that everyone can help. I think many families and parents think of adoption and foster care as major life commitments that require a lot out of a family. And we've learned that there's all kinds of ways to support this community of adoptive and foster care. That, there's respite care that is wildly helpful and makes a huge difference in our community of just providing a safe home, a safe place for kids to come by for maybe a couple hours on a Saturday to play. And that is something that is desperately in need for the foster care family community, especially, that I think a lot of families don't even know that's an option, that it's really, being almost a babysitter and being a safe place where kids can come and you can. So that is a really practical way to just reframe this community and this conversation, to look for ways that you can support them without having to feel like you have to take on the entire world all at once.
All right, you froze again, but I think we got the most of it. I was looking for ways to support that. And it's like, even just like a mom on the playground and you're chatting up with another mom or a foster mom, and you could, offer up like, hey, why don't, have a joint play date? Or you don't have to be a part of some formal system to do respite care. I'm imagining that you can just say, hey, why don't I take the kids for an hour after the soccer game and you go take care of whatever you need to, and then I'll bring them home. I never thought about that as a really sort of tactical, practical thing that we could do to support families who foster and adopt. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, it does depend state by state. There's some states that may require some background checks or some processes for some states, but many states give foster care families common sense judgment. Like, hey, if you would leave your own kids if you would trust this family with your own or with biological kids, or it's using some common sense there. But yes, definitely check with your state on the guidance that they provide for that. Look into respite care.
Yeah. And sorry to put you on the spot, but do you know of any websites or organizations that our listeners can go to if they're interested in either supporting families with foster youth or becoming a foster parent themselves or adoptive parent?
Yes. So I'm located just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, and I would encourage you to find there's tons of local organizations in the foster care and adoptive space. And that's where you're going to get kind of the best bang for your buck of supportive care, is finding your local nonprofits that are serving these communities. In our area of Charlotte and Northern South Carolina, Defend the Fatherless is an organization that we have partnered with, that every spring for the past couple of years, so the Hey Mr. Jim brand, we sponsor a family camp for a weekend where hundreds of kids come for a great camp experience at a YMCA camp with their whole families. And it's just a really, really special, fun day. So Defend the Fatherless in our region is one that I would absolutely recommend, but I would encourage you to also look around in your own regions.
Thank you for that. And while we're shouting out things, can you shout out your podcast and where folks can find information about you?
Yeah, thank you. So in the kids podcast world, my name's Mr. Jim. I make stories for kids. So think bedtime stories and short stories for kids to listen to, maybe in the car or during playtime. And we developed a device called Story Button that makes it easier for kids to listen to kid podcasts off of screens, which is, one of the big, great things about kid podcasts is it's audio content. So it's screenless, but unfortunately 90% of kid podcasts are played on a screen. So we went out to solve that problem, to move the listening off screens. And that's why we made Story Button.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a whole nother Teddy Talk, screen time. Stay tuned. I want to end this, Jim, with a very big bonus question. So our listeners already know this, but maybe you don't, is that Grizzlette here was my childhood bear. And Grizzle is inspired by my sister's childhood bear. As a youth, I would line them up and I would teach them. And I loved school so much. I played school on the weekends, and I also had friends. But this whole Teddy Talks was inspired by play is the language of the child. And we love, and you as a storyteller probably know this already, that telling stories is a fantastic way to learn. So tell us a story if you can. Do you remember having a favorite bear or item or lovey from childhood that you can share with us?
So when I was in second grade, my dad went on a long trip. I think he was gone for 3 months on the other side of the country. That was super traumatic of having my dad go away for 3 months for work. And so in the middle, we made a trip out as a family to go see him and spend a couple days with him. And it was amazing. While we were leaving, our airplane got delayed or something because of rain. And I don't remember exactly why, but I was super emotional. I was just crying. I was sad to say goodbye to my dad for another period of time. And we were sitting in the airport and there was this standoff to the side so we were in Monterey, California. And there were, for some reason, a whole stand of leopard seal stuffies. And I don't know how, because my mom was not one to make last minute purchases of like, oh yeah, go pick out whatever you want. That never happened. But I guess I was crying enough to where I deserved this thing. I don't know. She wanted to stop me from crying. And so anyway, I got this seal, and this leopard seal, which just became while my dad was gone, like this was the thing that I just like held on to. And I don't know how in the world, but we still have it. And so now my middle son, it's become his thing. And this seal's like now 30 years old or something. I don't know how it's stood the test of time, because it's seen a lot of life experiences along the way. But yes, we still have that leopard seal in the family.
And what is the leopard seal's name? I must know.
It's evolved. It was Leppy for a while, and I'm not sure which. There's been all like Leppy, Sealy. I don't know what the name is today.
All right. Well, stay tuned for the next episode of Teddy Talks, where we reveal the evolution of Leppy the seal. I love that story. And what I love about it the most, Jim, is that these stuffies at airports can be these transitional objects for us, so that they can remind us of a time. Many a childhood memory has been made by an airport stuffy stand. But I love that story. And I love that you've passed on Leppy the seal to your child as well. So just, if you ever want to get a replica of Leppy the seal, you're going to have to go, as I did, to the vintage section of eBay. And that hurt my feelings a little that my childhood bear is in the vintage section. But here we are. But I'm so glad that you still have that. And I'm so glad for all of your time and consideration and love that you have for children and foster youth, and for doing all that you do. So thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. We love this community. This is definitely the community that we are all in for supporting. And so I think there's many great things coming up, but please, if you're listening right now, please help your local community of adoptive and foster care families, whether through donations or respite care.
Thank you so much. We will see you all on the next episode of Teddy Talks.